Esther wanted me to talk about some updates of things that we're looking at the city, things that have happened. Just a little bit of update, I think, of everything. Um, First of all, if you live on the eastern side of District 4, I did a drive along with Chief Brown a couple of weeks ago about some of the hot spots that we've been seeing crime and people camping and doing other things that they're not supposed to be doing, and things seem to be way better than what it used to be last year. Not perfect, but way better. So I really appreciate Chief Brown and his team and Marie for all the work that they've done. And he asked me, what else can we be doing? I'm like, this and a little bit more, but I think we're on the right track. I know the mayor just announced another way for police and anti-crime, so I think she'll talk about that, but I think it's being very effective. We see a lot of police officers around downtown in that area. We have approved a lot of funding for affordable housing, and it's been a great way to collaborate with the state. The mayor has worked so hard to have these conversations where the state actually does support Salt Lake City with the affordable housing crisis that we have. And so finally they realize that it's not just a Salt Lake City issue, it's a statewide issue, and they need to come to the table with some solutions and support the municipalities that we're dealing with things that are really beyond what municipalities do. And so we're excited about that. The Other Side Village, which is a program by the Other Side Academy, as you may know, they are located on 700 East right now. They are really good neighbors to our neighborhood and to our district, and they're trying to pilot a program in the west side of Salt Lake City, which is a tiny home community that will help homeless folks, but also mentally ill homeless folks. And so it's a pilot project, so everybody is still excited, but also nervous of how it's going to go. But that decision is coming in a few weeks, maybe perhaps even next week. So I think the public comment period closed it. But if we haven't, you can still send us emails. Maybe not come to the meeting, but yes, you can send us emails and you can tell us if you think that's a good idea. And that is to rezone property so that we can have residences there, and also, thank you, and also to lease a piece of property that belongs to Salt Lake City at $0 in exchange of some public benefits, which is helping with the homeless issue in our city. Pioneer Park has been funded about $10 million in the sales tax bond, and you also have a GEO bond that the taxpayers need to vote on, and that is coming up in November. So I'm sure Kristen is here and the mayor will talk about it and what she's proposing. But that's up to you. The sales tax bond already passed. The council votes on it, and Pioneer Park are $10 million, which is very important in our district because it's one of the largest ones we have, and that's, I think, the only one that we'll have for a long, long time. So we better invest in that, especially if we're preparing for the Olympics to come. So we need to have a really good park out there. Then the other ones that some of you may be interested is SROs, RMA 30, and the parking ordinance, and those are coming up as well. We've heard a lot of comments from people, both I think it's split a little bit, both in favor and in opposition. As usual, for the most part, I'm still not there yet on both. I mean, I can see the good things on all of them, and also the things that worry me that if it goes wrong, then we're going to have to, it's an added expense, and in my opinion, sometimes the city will have to come up with some funding and some issues if, for example, the SROs go a way that we don't want it to go. For those, SROs, I know the Bueno Avenue is similar. It's not the same, but it's similar. So, if I transport myself back to when I was single, out of college, and maybe I didn't have issues about moving in with somebody that I didn't know, and I could share a bathroom, or I could share a kitchen, and then pay less until I could get a good job and get financially stable, might be a good option. If it's run well, great. But if it's not, and then, we're having issues with certain people, if crime or things that are not supposed to happen, then that's when I worry, because then that comes back to our police department, and all of us are trying to fix that. So that's why I'm sure Nick Norris is behind me saying, I've heard you say that before. But that's coming up with the parking, the same thing. Parking, as in planning theory, in a way. Sorry, Jen, I see you, but you heard me say this at the Central City Community Council last week. The theory, and as planners, we thought that reducing parking and trying to change behaviors with and put multifamily housing along transportation corridors, that would actually help with changing our behaviors and using cars because of our air, because of sustainability issues and all of the things. But we're not there yet. I've been doing this for 22 years, and unfortunately, our streets are wide, and our city kind of lends itself for driving, and so then parking becomes an issue, and that's the reality in a way. So in my head, I'm like, okay, we invested so much money in tracks, in the zoning that we have passed, and time, transportation options. Do we now backtrack and allow more parking, and then we don't change behaviors and things, and then we accommodate, or we stick with the plan and we go for it, and then we reduce the parking? So that's my thinking about the parking. And then RMF 30, it will affect District 4, especially this neighborhood. We need housing. We need the housing. We can't keep up. The city invests a lot in financing, in asking for different things. We from the developers, and we can't keep up, even with all of the money that we invest and all of the zones and rezones that we do. We still can't keep up. So maybe it is time that we actually pass that one and see where it goes. But I have some suggestions that we wait until we do the housing loss mitigation plan. But I don't think we'll have the council support to wait, because this has been dragging for years now, and people want to move forward with this rezone amendment. So happy to get more comments from you, to advocate for either to pass it or not on any of the issues. And lastly, things are looking really good for Salt Lake City downtown. We just heard that since 2019, people coming to downtown to socialize or to come to the businesses is about 82%. So we've had 2% of the people come back. Where we're not doing that great is the office workers. So we're at 52% comparing to 2019. So we're still there. However, it feels more vibrant. We feel like there's more people downtown, and there's a lot of events already. So that's a really good signal for Salt Lake City. So with that, I think that's all I have. So thank you, Esther. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Question.
Yes.
Since you're having to depart early, this actually is a question for both you and the mayor. So I'll go ahead and just give it to you both at one time. Thank you. Thank you both for coming to the meeting. Appreciate that. But I'm sure that you and our council are aware of the city's sidewalk snow removal of 24 hours after a snowfall, that we can report a sidewalk. To that 24 hours, there is another 24 hours to educate, that's the C's word, owners every year for the first offense of the season. So let me tell you about a case scenario that happened last year for us. It snowed on a Thursday, and with a 24-hour delay, I was not able to report to the city of sidewalks until Monday. But the problem is that on Sunday, it also snowed. So then what happens is that you have to wait another 24 hours. So on day 5, I was finally able to contact the city to see if they can get that snow ordinance enforced. What happened then is that if the city does come out on the Tuesday, day 5, to the property and does show that it's a violation of the ticket, and provided that they've already given the 48-hour education information, the owner, the ticket to the owner, which the city allows 2 more days for that, because what they do is the city will ticket the owner of the property that's on the sidewalk, and so then they give you 2 more days to mail a ticket. So we're talking 8 days that we have to walk on icy and snow-packed sidewalks. And I've written to you, your staff, our council persons, their staff, and have never received a response on how the city plans to resolve such an inconsistency in the 24-hour ordinance. So could you tell me how this will fit into your pedestrian-friendly, walkable neighborhood when your department leaders don't enforce the 24-hour laws?
Thank you. I think Esther wants to say something about this.
Well, I know, and I really appreciate your comment, and it's really important. We have a really tight agenda, and because I wasn't able to go on first, I wasn't able to talk about that we're actually taking all comments and questions in writing so that we can actually act on them and follow up on them and help get answers to the community as well.
But
I
this
don't
has
know.
been approached
When I
before.
come up, I'll address it.
Okay, thank you,
That
Mayor.
sounds great.
Thank you.
But would you also take a second and one of the slips, or just attach it to one of the slips that were on the seats for comments,
Mhm.
and bring it in so that we can actually follow up on it with you?
Actually, I've given this to the council as well as a notification of these are the problems with the sidewalk ordinance.
I'm talking
And
about
I've never received anything
to
from the
East
council
Central.
here as
You-
well.
We haven't received it at East Central, but would love to take it now.
Yeah, you have, because I've sent it directly to you last year.
Okay, well, thank
We
you,
wanna
Esther.
thank you for your time.
Thank you for
Yeah.
your time too, and I will
This is
see you
great.
next month.
Okay. Now, we have a pretty high-packed agenda tonight, so, and I think there are a lot of things that a lot of us have as comments and concerns, and we very much want to hear all of them, but we're not going to necessarily be able to hear them and answer everything tonight, but the hope is, especially since we are going back to our pre-COVID schedule, we're going to be meeting monthly, and we'll be able to report back on things each month, as well as if you're on our mailing list, we're gonna be sending things out. So let me just kind of go through. We've got a little backwards here, and so now I'm just gonna go back through a couple of our thoughts here. First of all, I'm gonna pass around a committee sign-up sheet for a couple of committees that we are starting, that Jerry is gonna talk a little more about when she comes up. These were the comment sheets that were on the seats. If you didn't get one, there are more folks around that can pass them out. Any questions and comments, please put them down and we will get back to you. In East Central, we have a couple of ground rules for these meetings. I'm gonna read them real quickly. We have respect and civility. We care about everyone, our neighbors, our city, and our presenters. We stand by our core values and also negotiate win-win whenever possible. Everyone has the right to understand and to be heard. We will take the time needed. We will consider all viewpoints. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And we ask you to please become involved, get your neighbors to become involved in the committees and also on our mailing list. We do post on Facebook. I know many people don't like Facebook, but we do post on Facebook almost daily little tidbits that are going on for our neighborhood. So I wanted to make sure you knew that. We have just published our top 10 list for East Central Community Council for goals and issues and questions and concerns that we have. And I will actually add your IC enforcement issue to the one about pedestrian safety so that we have that included. This has come from our meetings and from various surveys that we've taken. We will be doing this monthly to update. So we just barely issued it today. We are going to send it out to our mailing list tonight so that everyone will be able to see it. You'll be able to add comments and information to it. I'm gonna do just a quick, tiny highlight of it. Number one, we have our concern and mitigation and concern about the University of Utah's growth path. We're very excited and we love the U. We have many benefits. Those of us who live in this area don't live here thinking that we're not going to have students and growth in this area. But the planning and the impacts in our neighborhood are massive. So we have those things listed. We have our forest and our urban trees that are a lot of them are really suffering and dying that we're real concerned about. Number three was the extensive number of apartment buildings that are not up to code and houses that have more than 2 or 3 units in them that have been approved that are not, that are actually dangerous both for the health and safety of people living in them, and also we've had some fires and other things that have happened. Number 4, we have rezoning and exceptions and requests being made for building and zoning, where we have so much zoning for many different types of varied zoning already in place that we are not opposed to development. We just are asking that development be put where it was master planned and where the zoning is rather than exceptions. And often our out-of-state developers are coming in and tearing into the neighborhood and actually destroying our neighborhood. So that is number 4. We are asking for more police presence in our neighborhood due to the crime, the break-ins, the car thefts, the homeless sleeping in our yards, property damage, the drug houses, and also back to number 1, the student parties that are taking place. Since we know that student parties are happening very often during the big football games like this coming Saturday, parking enforcement is doing an amazing job because they're actively coming during game times to enforce parking. And we're asking the police to do the same thing, to be proactive on game days so that we can actually kind of counteract some of that. There are more ideas on here and you'll see them. Pedestrian safety, bike safety, we have some of our hot spots, our park and open space. We have lighting. We have a couple of places that are very critical for where both bikes and or pedestrians are that still need some lighting. We have a concern about overall costs for the city because at this point, we've got about 18,000 people in our area. We have the highest density per square mile in the city. We're averaging about 9,531 people per square mile compared to the average in the city of 1,838. So a big difference. And so really having some help related to just our cost, and what's new and what's published in this is really what the average low income federal guideline is. And for a household of 2, low income is $65,000 annually. And our area actually fits into that. That's our average. So our neighborhood is basically low income. We have many aging folks that have been displaced in entire apartment buildings, given 3 days notice. And senior people have lived there 15 and 20 years are suddenly evicted and have no place to go. And so we have some concerns about that. So that's our current top 10. That may not be everything that you also have, but please take a look, send in your comments. We'll do more each month. Okay, I'm trying to go fast here. I want to talk real quickly. We have, we care very much about our Douglas Church building. It unfortunately, once again, has not been awarded to McGillis, who we have been supporting as an entire community. It is once again with another developer potential. At least this developer is not planning to take the building down. That's what we've been told. We don't know exactly who that is. They are in the due diligence process right now, so that's what we know on that. We are updating on Facebook. Anytime we get any notice on that, we are updating on Facebook. I wanted to tell you quickly, you all know about Judge, and that Judge is out for bid. It was in the Tribune also today, I think. And I literally am getting developer calls daily. Yesterday.
Can you please tell us what it is? I didn't read the paper today.
So Judge has officially put out notice that they are looking to move to 21st South, where St. Anne's is. And they're looking to sell the property for a significant amount and also do a capital campaign so that they can build a building there. And so they're looking for people who are interested. I've been told the University of Utah and IHC are both interested. I don't know if that's true other than University of Utah. And like I said, I've got developer calls coming in massively. I've also got developer calls coming in for all parts of our area in mass quantity. They're coming in, and again, they're wanting to tear down whole blocks of our neighborhood. So the goal is to try and give up people where they could go. There's some good places they could go. The nice thing about the Judge property is it's on a hill. If they built into the hill, they could actually be quite strong and yet not impact the neighborhood as much as 13th East and Harbor Bay. So Harbor Bay has officially pulled out of the 13th East project. That is good and not necessarily good news. Harbor Bay said basically, Steve said, we've worked on this and invested for 3 years, and we just can't afford to do that anymore. We have other parts in the country where they instantly want us to build and develop right next to their university, so that's where we're going. Landmark, who is the one who's been acquiring the buildings, is still pursuing what they can possibly do and what other developer might work with them. So we will likely be working with a new developer. Landmark has now purchased the Bride Shop, the apartment behind it. They have the John Thomas apartment building, the old Allstate building, as well as they own Kinko's and what used to be Big Ed's. It's now, so that whole area, so quite a significant amount of building. We have yet to identify who purchased the University Award building, University Street. They established a new corporation under the address as their name, and we do not know who that is. So we were hoping to work with them so that we could do some win-win things there as well, but we have not yet. Okay. So now I want to introduce Jerry. She's one of our co-trustees for the University Neighborhood. And she is serving and helping us with nominations for our board.
Hello, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you for coming tonight, and I'll try to be quick because I know we all want to hear from Mayor Mendenhall, but I am opening nominations for a few different positions, and we'd love to have more people involved and have more decision-making power. So I'm going to begin with Secretary Parliamentarian. You would be a voting member of the board, record meetings, post to YouTube, and it's not a big time commitment, but it is interesting. All of these should be on that sheet that Esther started around. As I talk about them, if you decide, you are interested, try to catch up with that sheet, or you can always email the ECC, you can call me, my phone number's on, should be on the information you have. The second position is a Benyon neighborhood rep. We have not had a rep for, I don't know how long, a while.
3 or 4.
For Benyon. Benyon's boundaries are 4th to 9th south and 7th to 10th east. And you do need to live within those boundaries to be a rep. But you, if you do live in the neighborhood, you could represent your neighbors as a voting member of our board and come to meetings. You could split it into, share it with another person. I do that with Debbie Fetter. She and I share our position. The next one is East Liberty Park Community Liaison. So East Liberty Park, their boundaries overlap our boundaries. There's a block, 8th to 9th south, that overlaps. And we would really like to get a liaison that would work with them and work with us and make sure that we're not leaving that group of people unattended or not able to be heard. Porch Fest, we're gonna get back into Porch Fest, we're excited about this. We would like to have a chair that would chair a committee. And what we would like to do, rather than the big Porch Fest that's annual, is start having quarterly, monthly, whatever, especially spring, summer, fall, little gatherings with live music. We can use the new pavilion on 11th East. For that, we can get a food truck, people can bring picnics. So once we have somebody who would be interested in sharing that, then we can get a committee together and start arranging that. We actually have a couple of people who have already said they would love to play. One's a guitarist, one's a pianist. So I'm sure we have a lot of talent in our neighborhood and we can get some music going. Last item is Neighborhood Watch, a chair to get that going. I know many years ago when I first moved into the neighborhood that the Neighborhood Watch program was pretty strong. We'd like to get that going again as well. So we're looking for a chair for that. I'm opening those nominations, so we will vote on them next month, and so please get your names in or talk with us if you have any questions. Thanks.
Just want to see if anybody wants to nominate anybody.
Sure. Yes.
Yes, I'd like to nominate David Schutt for the BCC ELPCO liaison.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. And give me your full name.
David Schutt, SCHUTT.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else?
I second the nomination.
Anybody
else? Come on.
I had a whole list of names that I was trying to get the board to nominate. And they were all going, well, we don't even know them. So I said, well, then have a whole month to decide and we can try and talk them into it in that month. So, I just want to say one more thing. Does anybody want to nominate themselves? We've made the jobs very small. If everybody does a little thing, then we don't have to do too much, any of us. So.
I'm not necessarily, I would like to know more about the liaison.
Okay, awesome.
Because I live
in that area as well.
There,
so we can talk to you after about that, right?
You can have co-liaison.
Okay, fantastic.
I'm very cautious.
Okay. We're very excited to have Kristen Riker with us. It's I have some beloved departments at the city. This is one of my beloved departments. I'm very big on trees and open space. So I'm excited to have her present her to us now.
Just realized that my notes are on my laptop, and so, no, I do. And so, yeah.
Could we also just take the microphone over that way?
Yeah, can we just bring the microphone over here? And I can do it from here, that'd be great.
Want to go fully handheld?
I'm sure I want to be the chair, but I don't know. To kind of be in the neighborhood watch. And is that like a night? Is it mostly related? I mean, I guess we have to be turning. Program. Sorry, I missed today. It was too late signing.
Thanks, everyone. Mayor has such confidence in me to do this without my notes, but I am presenting today on the Parks Bond. And part of the reason why I am going to use my notes and I am going to read this is because, excuse me, I'll talk for a minute, is because as a city employee, I cannot advocate for or against a ballot item. And legally, I would be responsible if I do that, especially in a public setting. So I'm going to be very careful with my words. I am going to use the script that was vetted by the Attorney's Office in Finance. And when I answer questions, I'm going to try to be very thoughtful to make sure that I don't cross that line. So I just want to preface my presentation that way. So let's see. Thank you, that's great. So this November, Salt Lake City voters have an opportunity to vote on the Parks, Trails, and Natural Lands Bond.
Now I'm gonna need some water. Thank you, Michael.
This bond provides the opportunity to build on existing investments to enhance the public land system. If passed, the city plans to fund 8 significant projects throughout the city. And they are shown in this map, and I will describe these in a little bit further detail in my presentation. The bond projects were identified through public input, the priorities expressed in Reimagine Nature Master Plan that was recently adopted, preliminary polling data, geographic distribution, equity in level of service across the city, and the mayor's 2022 plan. Project budgets plus a 20% contingency add up to an $85 million bond that we're looking at. So the bond funding, if approved, will implement components of Reimagine Nature Master Plan. And I want to share some of the highlights. The bond will help construct the new Glendale Regional Park at the old Raging Waters Water Park site. That's on 17 South to add a new regional park and amenities in that area on the west side, and this will help alleviate some pressures from Liberty Park and Sugar House Park so that the west side also has a regional park. The second one there is it will create new parks, including playgrounds, trails in Glendale and the Granary District, where there are currently very few green spaces. It'll update aged facilities and increase community identity for at least one neighborhood park, trail, or open space per council district and at Allen Park, Fairmont Park, and Liberty Park. It will also improve degraded waterways to enhance water quality, pollinator habitat, migratory nesting grounds, etc. And then it'll complete the connection of the Folsom Trail to the Jordan River Parkway, adding landscaping and additional trail amenities, improving east-west connections, and providing easier access for biking, walking to and from those public spaces. And then lastly, it'll increase the tree's canopy and plant biodiversity and restore natural landscapes in parks and open spaces that use less water to help improve and adapt to our arid environment. Did I skip one? I think I did. Yeah. Planning other critical steps for some of the projects to be funded by the bond are in various stages of engagement, and some will be done soon, some are just about to start. So first, you can view the Glendale Regional Park Vision Plan online. That is complete for the Glendale Water Park. Allen Park Adaptive Reuse and Management Plan is anticipated to begin this fall and will include a public engagement process to help identify the opportunities at Allen Park. The Liberty Park Playground and the Jordan River enhancements will begin if funding is approved by voters. If funding is approved, other projects, those shown here on the screen, will proceed with more planning and public engagement opportunities, including completion of the Folsom Trail, Reimagine Neighborhood Parks, Trails, Open Spaces, improvements to Fairmont Park, and to Fleet Block. All bond-funded projects will include comprehensive community engagement to determine the final design and implementation. Public engagement for each project will be determined based on needs of the site and the current status of public project input. So please sign up for the Public Lands Monthly Newsletter. That's found on our website or email at parksbond@slc.gov to stay informed throughout. I'll have that on the screen in a minute here. Some folks might be asking, well, why is bond funding being considered? And currently 26% of the city's general fund comes from property taxes. Of the total general fund budget, approximately $18 million is allocated to fund public lands, and much of that budget is directed to the maintenance of our current park system. And many of the assets in that system are beyond reasonable levels of maintenance. So from 2010 to 2020, Salt Lake City grew by 7%, adding approximately 13,000 new residents. The 2019 Public Lands Needs Assessment identified the need for an additional 94 acres of parks and trails. This growth also increases the use of and wear and tear of our existing public land system. So if approved, bond funding would help the city add more usable park and public land space in multiple locations, helping to spread the demand by making parks more accessible and by replacing aged infrastructure. And that aged infrastructure currently requires a lot more maintenance than some other sites. If the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond is not approved, the Public Lands Department will continue to receive its annual budget for maintenance, and we will still get small improvement funds through the CIP process. And we will continue to work on making some of these needed improvements in our parks through our current system, through the CIP system, and through impact fees, and those sorts of things. It would just be a little bit slower. If the bonds are approved by voters and all issued at the same time, and not taking into account existing bonds that will be paid over time, the estimated property taxes to pay the bonds would be approximately $53.80 per year on an average primary residence valued at $576,000 and $97.83 per year for a business or secondary residence of the same value. If the bonds are approved by voters and are issued in 2 or more installments, depending on market conditions, it is possible that the cost of the bonds would not increase the existing property tax. If the bonds are not approved by voters, the property tax burden would decrease as a result of other general obligation bonds falling off. So these are important dates to know. These include the public hearing and public meetings. You can share your comments for or against at either meeting. The October 11th meeting has already happened, but you could do that on October 18th. On the 18th, elected officials will share the argument in favor of the bond at the public meeting. You can visit the Salt Lake City Council website shown on this slide for more information about how to participate in the meeting in person or virtually. And we invite everyone to learn more about the bond and its associated projects. Please register to vote, please vote, and stay informed with future updates. And thank you. This is the website for the bond where you will find more information about each of the projects. Also an email page that you can send any comments or questions that you might have. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
What is your sense of, do people like that? I mean, you've got to know what's happening.
So in April, we did do a poll of Salt Lake City residents. It was a statistically valid, randomized poll done by an outside agency. And with that poll, we got a 70% approval rating.
I know there's more information online, but in brief, what improvements to the Jordan River system are on the list?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So the Jordan River Trail has, as you know, a lot of invasive species along the trail, and it's overgrown. And it also has multiple parks all along the river. And so the idea of this, and it's quite a bit of funding, but the idea of this would be to clean up the invasives, and open up the Jordan River so it's more accessible to people so that you can actually get to the river. I don't know if you've been to the new Three Creeks Park. It's beautiful, and it's, in my mind, like, it's a little slice of what the river could be. And not that the whole river would be that manicured, even though that's more of a natural park. It would still have a lot of natural spaces, but some of those other parks, like Modesto, that are all along the river, could be improved to improve access to the river and improve use of the river so that you could actually get in a canoe and float along the river. Yeah.
You know, my concern as I heard you talking is there are a lot of people out there that might vote, but they don't really care about the issues. They just would see, oh, my taxes are going up, vote no. So I would like to suggest that you find a way to publicize your proposition there and get it out to kind of disengaged type people. Not like the people that are sitting here right now, but people
What the
who
city
don't vote
can do is
anything.
educate folks about the bond and what will be in the bond. And today, some of us received a voter information packet, and hopefully in the next couple days, you will also receive one if you haven't already. So there is a voter information packet that's going out to every single resident in Salt Lake City. Also, in your ballot, you will see that there is a little postcard that also has some information, and it will lead you to the website for the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Bond. And we have done some other things to educate folks. The mayor's done a really great video that you can find online about the bond, and we're also translating that into Spanish. And some of those spots, the mayor's spot, and then council member Alejandro Puy will be doing the Spanish speaking. Both of those will be aired on public radio stations. And we are sharing this information to all of our stakeholders. We have friends groups, we have community councils that we have shared information that could go out into newsletters. Council members are putting it in their newsletters. So we're trying to share what is on the bond so that people can make a informed decision about that vote.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed in your presentation you didn't mention any funding from the ZAP tax.
No.
Does that figure into funds that you're using for any of these projects, or is it only for old projects?
So the Zoos, Arts, and Parks tax, which you're referring to, is managed by Salt Lake County, and that is 0.1% of the sales tax that is voted on every 10 years, and it sunsets every 10 years. And so in 2026, that will come up again for a public vote. So those projects are really very separate from this GEO bond, and they cover the entire county. The last ZAP tax that we received, we did get some funding for the D Glen tennis courts. The city will be applying again for ZAP funding, and we will work on that process in 2025 to accomplish more parks, open spaces that are needed if whatever the bond doesn't cover, or if the bond doesn't get funded, some of these projects could be on that tax as well.
So on this bond issue, if it gets passed, is any of the money going to be there for safety issues? For instance, I spend a lot of time on the river, riding the river trail, and there are parts of it, I'm sure you know the parts, that I would never go to by myself, because I feel they're very dangerous. I mean, I feel they're dangerous because of all the encampments. So I'm just wondering if any of that funding will be used for that.
I would say most of the money would help with safety issues. Activation of parks, making parks more relevant to the communities, creating more accessibility, getting more people in our public spaces will make parks feel much safer. So some of those issues that you see on the Jordan River, and I was just on it today, I ride my bike to work on the Jordan River, I know what you're talking about. Some of those issues are gonna still happen, but when you have more people that are around, it feels safer. We have issues in Liberty Park, in Sugar House Park, Fairmont Park, but when you have a lot of folks there, it feels safer, and people feel less comfortable committing crimes when other people are around. And so the idea of improving our neighborhood parks and the Jordan River and making improvements to these parks that will activate the park so that the communities will use them more will actually make them much safer. In addition, we will consider lighting and sight lines and those kind of things that make a park feel safer.
A police presence would make a big difference.
And we do have park rangers, thank you. So our park rangers started in August.
Haven't seen one yet.
You haven't seen one yet. They are out there, and we have 19, well, we have 19 positions. We haven't filled them all yet. We have a couple that are still open. They're on bikes. We're still waiting for their vehicles because it's taking forever to get the vehicles. So they are a little bit more confined to bikes, but they are out there. The hubs for the rangers are Liberty Park, Pioneer Park, the Jordan River Trail, and Fairmont Park. And they start there and they go to neighboring parks all around the community. They end their day there just so that they don't start at my office because that wouldn't make sense, right? So they start and end at the parks, they go all over the place. And if you see one, please stop them and say hello. They want to talk to you. They want to know everybody that is visiting our parks so that you know them. And if you see something happening, you can tell them, and then they can make sure the proper authorities are available to manage whatever situation might come up. They are not law enforcement. They are a friendly presence in the park, and they are there to make us feel safer in our parks and activate whatever systems might need to be activated if there is a need in the park. And I know my time is up, so thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm hoping you all have a second to fill out the questions that you would like to ask the mayor, because we have some board members who are going to help gather. In fact, I want to introduce the board that's here. You met Jerry. If the board could stand up so that everybody can see them. We have Frederick in the back, don't be shy, stand up. Jonathan here, Jen, stand up. Melinda, stand up.
I won't stand up.
Can't stand up. Who am I missing? Kim back there in the corner. We have a board total of about 12 people that serve as the board of East Central. Now, has anybody thought about now nominating yourselves or anyone else that you can think of?
Esther, I only saw 2 positions open on that handout. Sorry, how many more are you looking for?
So we're looking for secretary parliamentarian, Benyon neighborhood rep, the ELPCO liaison, and then we have several committee heads. We're starting slow. Prior to COVID, we used to have a whole host of committees, but with COVID, things kind of died away. We're starting slow with Porch Fest Salt Lake and also our neighborhood watch committees. But if there are other interests that you have, I mean, we used to have all kinds of committees going, so more than happy to have you join us. In fact, I want to recognize Kathy Scott, who's here, who is a longtime secretary and officer of East Central forever. I haven't seen her for a long time. You know, she lives in the Benyon area, just wanted to mention that, in case anybody wants to nominate her for anything. I did want to also just mention that the University of Utah Applied Science Building Construction Project is starting this week. Construction vehicles right now are planned to go along University Street. It's going to be closed for like 1.5 years on the two kind of sections. It's going to be kind of a little bit difficult. We've sent a letter to the U asking for a couple of ideas of how to maybe make it a little easier. There was not a lot of coordination on the construction plan, just the actual building itself. So there's some information again on our Facebook page about that, along with the picture and so forth. I also wanted to just talk a tiny bit about parties. For some reason, since COVID, parties have really gone kind of crazy. Those of us who live in the area, we know that students are going to move in and be students. There's no thought that we're, if we're going to live here, we know we're next to the University of Utah. That's just the way it is. Everything from transportation to student parties, not a problem. It's when it's gone crazy. Ava from the mayor's office, right there, is sitting very quietly in the back there. woke up one morning at 2:00 and there were 200 students out in the street having quite a time. So I've been roaming around to the houses and actually talking to the students. I've been very pleased with these bright, young, most of them out-of-state students who are here thinking that they should just have a party town somewhere that has bonfires and lots of fun things going on, just like they expected in other towns. So I want to have us work proactively in trying to help so that somehow we come up with a place like that that doesn't encroach in our neighborhood. But they've been very respectful. Neighbors are now texting me in the middle of the night and saying it's happening, and I've put my number out there so people can. And I'm going out and helping our police and others because I can take a different approach because I'm neighborhood and I'm not city. I also want to talk for a second about our city and the funding and the good people that we have working there. I was, I don't know what I was before, what I would call me before. I was quite an activist. And I'd get riled up quite a bit about the city and, East Central used to have a reputation back in the 90s of pickets and lawsuits. That was kind of the style. And somewhere in there I had an opportunity to be inside Salt Lake City for just a moment. And I was amazed at the amazing people and staff that are all there and their hearts and how good they work. And what I also was amazed about is how many projects had been left from years gone by that people were trying to clean up and fund because 20, 30, 40 years ago, they didn't actually invest in some of the infrastructure or the cleanup or whatever. They were doing projects that were special projects. And so each administration that's come back through has had to sit and try to fix some of that, and it's pretty amazing. That's an example of our parks. So go back and fix some of the things that haven't quite been funded at the level they needed to be. And so I'm a big supporter of how hard people work inside the city. I just wanted to kind of say that. One of the things I want to highlight that I didn't say before because I'm a tree nut is I didn't talk about so many of our trees that are dying, that one of the suggestions we put on our top 10 was the consideration for the city to adopt a policy to allow it to be an enforcement issue, that we could actually report a tree that's not being watered. And we're not talking about where a windstorm comes through or there's some problem. We have so many trees that are dying that are big trees. And it's not just about trees, it is about our air quality. The amount of carbon that large trees can actually house versus the little tiny lollipop trees that are getting planted, is a whole big difference. And so we have some other tree nuts in the neighborhood. Two are sitting here in the second row who are going after some tiny forests. And we have been wanting to do some tiny forests on some of our islands and some of our vacant land and other spots. And we would love to be a pilot for that. So just want to put in a plug for that.
Enforcement is a big deal.
Yeah, enforcement's a big deal if we can do that. Okay, if you have questions for the mayor, has anybody got questions? If I could have some of the board members help collect them, if there are any. Come on, this is our one shot. We're so lucky to have Aaron here with us tonight. Mayor?
Hi. Applause at the beginning. Who knows what you'll feel like in a few minutes. Just kidding. I'm happy to be here with you. And I saw on the agenda that I was going to talk about some of the city's priorities and things we're doing, but then I was handed your top 10 when I sat down. So I'm going to try to merge the two and tell you a little bit about some of the high-level things that are going on. Happy to answer in-depth questions if I'm capable. Also, I have Nick Norris here, who's the director of our planning division. And somehow he has to wait and go after me. So Nick can answer some of the deeper planning level, affordable housing overlay, but I'll talk about all of that as best as I can. And then hopefully gonna get to some questions from you. But I wanna thank you for showing up. I know a lot of you, and some of you I know from walking your dogs because I live on Laird, and so I see your faces around. And I want to thank you for just caring about your community enough to spend a couple hours with your neighbors and some neighbors you haven't met because you care. And so those board positions, fill them up. You're already halfway there. You're already showing up to this meeting. So I hope you step up and I know you were just interested in the liaison, but just do it. Community councils are where it's at. And when I was on the city council for 6 years, just south of you in District 5, I had 5 community councils that I got the privilege to do this at on a monthly basis for about 6 years. And I gotta say, I actually really miss this. The best part for me about community council meetings is you're totally honest with me. Jen Colby's always totally honest when she comes to public hearings as well, and Tim Funk also when it comes to affordable housing. But you just, we're gonna have an honest conversation, and I don't really care for the fat in those conversations anyway, so let's cut to it. So thank you for being here, and thank you to Ava Lopez, who represents me in your meetings all the time, and she's a fantastic human being, and I'm grateful for you, Ava. And you're also the expert on a lot of the top 10 issues that I'll try to incorporate here tonight. And then also you're a great detective for this district, Marie. You're amazing. Sorry, you're at the end of the agenda. In other community councils, the detective goes at the top, so you might want to talk to Esther about this. I don't know. The city's priorities from day one of my administration have been addressing the growth that's happening here to try to get the most good out of it for us as Salt Lakers, trying to support our community and those connections to the opportunities, addressing the inequities that have happened, that are persistent, frankly, even the redlining that covered parts of this neighborhood, Central City, and most of our west side, even though eliminated in the 60s, are still predictive lines for the outcomes of Salt Lakers who live in those neighborhoods by many measures. So addressing those issues, and then also addressing our environment. You know that I came into city work because I was an air quality activist, and then I became an advocate, and then I co-founded a nonprofit, and found that I really like talking about policy, and I care about a lot more than only air quality, but that's where my heart is in air quality and the environment. So that's our third pillar. And then when we got through the first year of 2020, we added a fourth pillar, and that's our city family. Most of your city's dollars, about 90%, pay for city employees to do the work of sweeping your streets and picking up your garbage and working at the sewer treatment facility and answering 911 and showing up, whether a fire department or police officer, engaging with the homeless, being park rangers, cutting the lawns, you name it. 90% of city's budget is for the people. And what every entity, whether it's a community council or a school classroom or a city government or federal government, went through a lot in 2020 and into 21. So we realized there were some things that we needed to do better. But I want you to know those are my 4 key areas of focus. So can I kind of try to incorporate some of your top 10 and some of the things that are happening in those areas? And maybe it'll spur questions, so keep raising your hands because there's active paper, pen solicitation happening here. We're still the fastest growing population in the nation here in Utah. From 2010 to 2020 census, we're a full percentage point above the next fastest growing state in the nation. And the majority of that growth is still our own kids. I know there's a lot of, we can go on tonight, and Esther's already talked about some of the international and national investment firms that are buying up homes, and there's a housing crisis and there's inflation happening, but there's a lot of growth happening here. And in the state of Utah, most of it's our kids. So we can't control the market as the city, but we can work on quality of life and how do we manage the growth that happens here. Now, you deal with a lot of rezoning, and the city council person is a great representative for you. Nick Norris and his team who work with the planning commission end up doing the hands-on work on rezones. And we can dig into those specifically if you want to, but I want to talk about the quality of life impact work that we're trying to do. Some people would say, I want to maintain my quality of life, and other neighborhoods would say, no, it's not even close to good enough and we have to bring it up dramatically. We try to work through people like Ava and our liaisons on a daily basis with really what does that mean for you and your community. And across the board, we were hearing we want to have more open space outside. We want to be able to access trails and nature, and we want those spaces to be healthy also. And so, and we saw that also with about 42% more activation of our parks from the beginning of the pandemic, and those numbers have sustained today. So it's like we remembered how much we liked getting outside, and we really need these spaces, and we've continued. Same with our trails, 40% more use on the trails. So to your question, one of your questions about what was the support, or how do we know people want this? The polling helped direct that, but the real use in the parks. So we've added the park rangers that Kristen talked about. We're adding bike patrol activation in and through neighborhoods as best as we can. One of the ways we're trying to do that and deal with the growth is by regrowing our police department. You're probably seeing even just this week, reporting from around the country about police departments losing officers and about crime continuing to escalate in other cities around the country. We hit our peak low of officers over a year ago now. It was 92 officers that we were down. And we are now, today, we're down 41 officers. But by the 92 numbers, we're down about 31 because we grew the department by 10 officers in a recent budget action when we took advantage of some federal grant dollars to bring in a violent crime task force with our city department. Nutshell is our city is recovering on our officers. And in the meantime, we're running 18 overtime shifts a day to make up for the need of patrol officers that's out there while we run new classes of recruits. So in November, we'll add 20 who will graduate from the police department recruit. In March, we'll do it again. In the end of May, we'll graduate another class. It's slow, but that's the time it takes to recover the officers. And so you're not getting a 41 officer deficit level of service because of those overtime shifts that we're running. Crime is down in Salt Lake City right now, and I say that fully acknowledging that if crime happens to you, it is up 100%. And you feel it, and it is scary, and whether you're in a public space or you're in your home and you come out, you'll be sitting on your porch and watch people checking door handles. I know what that feels like, and I know that me telling you crime is down may not resonate with your experience. Just know that we are working on this every single day. Between homelessness and crime, these are the key issues that run my time and my staff's time. My chief of staff, Rachel Otto, is also here in the audience with us tonight. Violent crime is down about 4.5%. And actually, when I looked at the crime statistics for this district, they're reflective of the citywide numbers really well. About 9% overall decline in crime year to date and 4.5% on violent crime. Property crimes as well are down about 9%. So at the same time, calls for service to 911 are up. They're up a dramatic amount, about 15% year to date. So more calls for service are happening, and when we break those calls out, the majority of them are assists to other police departments. So they're coming in to pursue a suspect or something. They're coming into our territory. They're unwanted persons calls, and they're roadside assists that are leading those increases in crime, or calls for service rather. But at the same time, we're also trying to divert the need to deploy officers. So if an officer's had surgery, they can't be out on patrol, they're still able to work. We're putting them on the phones to take some of those calls, like when you come out in the morning and if your car's been burgled, you still need a case number. We don't necessarily need to send an officer out. I could talk about police a lot more, and if you have questions about it, we can go down there further. But I want to talk about open streets. This was something we did in the city responding to the growth and demand for open space and ways to play. So for the last 3 summers, we say we opened Main Street. The truth is we closed it to cars and opened it to all of us on bikes and feet, strollers and anything else. And we've been doing it slowly like that with the Downtown Alliance because we want to measure what the impact is on the businesses there. And we have some really great news. One of those things, Councilmember Valdemoros mentioned that our downtown activation is recovering. We are actually the best recovered city in the nation. You may have seen that in the Tribune about 6 weeks ago in terms of people coming back into the downtown core. 30,000 to 40,000 people a weekend were coming to Main Street to just have some fun. sit at a restaurant, get a drink, walk up and down, maybe do some shopping at City Creek and walk back. And the businesses in that area were seeing 30% more revenue on those weekends than they were in 2019. And so I don't want you to think that every single business is thrilled about Main Street closing. Some of them miss the ability for their customers to drive right up on Main Street, park and get out. But it is my intention that we keep working toward a permanent opening of Main Street in our downtown. Our downtown resident population is doubling, literally doubling their downtown residents in the next 18 months. It's an incredible densification, vertical growth that's happening right in the downtown core. I don't mean here in East Central, I mean in the central business district. And I think that's wonderful. That's where our transit density is. That's where all the connections to tracks, Front Runner, our BRT that's gonna be coming through. And it's also the entertainment, as you know, recreation core. And it's a good thing for us as we start to become an 18-hour downtown city. So Open Streets is exciting. And in the face of all this growth that's happening, the city undertook a gentrification mitigation study. Because, I don't know, actually Esther, you might know this, but the West Side has historically had the highest number ratio of home ownership households, which I don't know if that's surprising to you, but the West Side owns a lot of homes. And yet these residents who have really built the community there are, as we all are, facing inflation, facing rising costs associated with taxes, and we can talk about the taxes too tonight. But we're seeing destabilization with the market forces. And I know you probably get the postcards too that we're interested in buying your home, especially the homes in opportunity zones, which there are many of on the west side of Salt Lake City, are very attractive to investment companies. So we're losing families and we're losing longtime residents who have built our neighborhoods. We want to know, as a city who can't control the market, how can we help to stabilize our residents? And that study is wrapping up soon. But you can expect opportunities for my office to be bringing to the city council to consider wealth building tools. And we've already made a pretty big investment through our redevelopment agency in a west side pilot project that would, I know that we're in East Central, but I think this is relevant to all of us. It's a pilot project that could be deployed in other parts of the city to help build ownership, build wealth, whether you're a small business or you're a homeowner or a renter who wants to be able to acquire or your home that you're in or buy a home. And the city could, for example, be your equity partner. And the equity that we build goes back into the fund and allows it to grow. And they would take a set amount of equity should they move in a number of years. I'm getting into weeds and details, but I need you to know that while we can't control the market forces, there's a lot of quality of life and neighborhood stabilization opportunities that we see. Let's talk about trees for just a moment. I am a tree hugger myself, and yeah, there's a couple of us. I heard from a Lorax tonight with some great ideas about how to address dying trees in the neighborhood. When it comes to enforcement, and I want to talk about the ice and shoveling issue also. I think, I'll be quite frank with you, it's possible you haven't heard back from council people or the city, my administration staff, because increasing enforcement isn't something that's been of interest. When I was a council person maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I remember this came up with Foothill Boulevard properties, houses who are actually technically responsible for their sidewalks that are on the other side of their backyard fence and are on Foothill Boulevard, who would have to go out and around their block and shovel. And yet, of course, people need to walk to the bus stop there, and it's a safety issue. And the council had no appetite to increase enforcement at that time for shoveling walks, because it's not very straightforward about how you get there and whether or not you're physically even able with some of our aging residents. And I think that was a part of the conversation at the time. So similar to the question about shoveling and taking care of trees in park strips, I can't speak to your private trees, but we're more interested in deploying the volunteerism of the community. And so we've built something in my administration called the SLC Corps, and that's tapping the volunteers of this community to take on projects, perhaps like watering new trees in a neighborhood or trees in an area that have an out-of-state owner and nobody's watering the lawn because prices have gone up on water. Ooh, raise your hand if you want me to talk about water too. We can talk about water. And I think it's a good path for us to go down on. There's plenty of, my son who's in the 7th grade needs to do volunteer hours for school every month. There's a lot of people who just out of goodness of their hearts would say, I'd go shovel a sidewalk in, if it's within 2 blocks of my house. So there's a person in our office called Katie Reiser, and we were cleaning alleyways down in the ballpark neighborhood last Saturday. She organizes volunteer efforts, and we've asked Katie to take on the tree watering conundrum, because the city does not own water trucks. I really want one. If anyone has a hookup with an old water truck, my staff's gonna kill me, but call me, because I want us to be able to drive out there like the city of Minneapolis does and water those new trees. They need 2 years to stabilize approximately. Kristen's the tree expert, and then many of them can survive without regular watering. So I believe we have volunteers in this community who want to show up and do that kind of stuff. See?
Make sure I don't get thrown in jail because I use the people who are supposed to be watering the trees faucet and water the trees.
Can't make sure you don't go to jail about that, but.
5 trees.
But I could get you a 5-gallon bucket that you
I have
could.
a 5
I
gallon.
know.
You're the
Some
unwanted person all those
extra
calls are coming in on.
He's lurking.
Yeah, the lurking.
The rogue gardener here. Yes, please.
About the citations, you're charging $50 for first occurrence, $75 for second occurrence, $100 and more for each other occurrence on the third or beyond. That is an awful lot of money that the city is losing by not enforcing the citations.
Yeah, I get that. Enforcement's not a course that I'm gonna push on. And I've met some of these residents in my 9 years in City Hall who've received some of these fines who can't even wield a shovel because they are aged, they have back issues, they live alone. And so I don't wanna argue about it, but I will say, I think our fines need to exist. They're there for a reason. But if people need help, then we should first see if we have residents who wanna work with us to coordinate that kind of help. And there's one more initiative called Mine Hometown, which is doing a lot of good work right now in the ballpark community in the west side. And they took down a garage for an elderly couple the garage was falling over. They'll build ADA ramps. So I'm just saying, if you have needs in this community, you know a neighbor who needs some help, whether that's a one-time effort or ongoing, please reach out to Katie Reiser in our office, and whether it's the My Hometown group or it's by SLC Corps, we can see if we can help. Let's help each other. That was one of the most beautiful things to come out of the pandemic work. I mean, I know we're not out of the pandemic, but that character comes through. It doesn't get created in trauma and turmoil. It just gets exposed, and either it's there or it's not. And this city was beautiful. I was so proud of you guys. I was so proud of you. And these ideas of how to help each other and the tenacity to just show up, it's all over the city. So I have no doubt that we can take on some issues that we haven't solved very well in the past and do it with our own energy from a volunteer aspect.
Do you have SLC mobile?
Ooh,
You can put
yes.
in the
location.
the issue and the location, and then at least it'll be recorded,
Thank
and then that 5-day thing and all that, so you can put
Track
it in
it.
multiple times, and it works.
So for viewers at home, please, and anyone in the audience, I know I'm going on and on, we're getting bored a little bit. Go to your app store and download SLC Mobile. If you don't have it, please do. You can report the sidewalk that needs help, and it does a GIS location on it. You don't have to be standing there, but you can. You can put pictures, if you have graffiti, if there's a pothole you wanna report, if there's a tree down or a limb down, if there's a homeless encampment that's cropped up. I didn't hear you. If it's a city sprinkler, oh wait, no, you can report the private ones as well, and public utility will reach out. I may or may not have done that in the last couple of weeks. Well, if your sprinklers go off at 2 and you don't know it, I mean, you need to know. We're not gonna fine you, we're just gonna let you know on the sprinkler. Anyway, SLC Mobile's fantastic, and I need you to know this also. If you're reporting homeless encampments, let's say, or anything that you feel like the police should know about, SLC Mobile is not 911. It will be gathered by the homeless engagement team, for example, or the trees team, but it is not 911. So if there is criminal activity or you think PD needs to show up, please call 911. 2 separate things, okay? And I think sometimes people think I put in SLC Mobile so they know about it. They don't necessarily. Okay. Water. You notice we've been raising the water rates. We are about 15% a year. And this has been a scheduled rate increase that started about 6 years ago, which is when we started taking on the rebuilding of the poop plant, which is actually called the water treatment facility. But it's, you know, that's what happens there. And it's 62 years old. It's way past its life expectancy. But we would keep renovating to meet the guidelines if it were possible, which we've done a lot of retrofits over the years. But at this point, the federal government has new nutrient guidelines. And I love that word. That's like, what's alive when it comes out the other end? What are those nutrients in there? And the nutrient allowance gets smaller and smaller, kind of like our air quality regulations. We know that there are health impacts at lower and lower levels than we used to be aware of. So we have to make that water even less nutrient rich. And the old facility, for one, is way past its life, but also it can't be retrofitted. So we've been building a brand new one exactly next door. I don't know if you go to Rose Park Golf Course and north of it, but that's where it is. And it's gonna be like a flip the switch. It just will seamlessly turn right on when it's ready in about 2 years. And we've received a lot of help with a WIFIA loan from the federal government, but also our rates are helping to pay the bond on what is the biggest public utility project we've ever done. And it's a good thing. And by the way, that water, when it is clean, I think there was like some footage of Joe Biden drinking out of that back end of a sewer treatment facility. It really is clean water. It flows back into the Great Salt Lake, and it always has. So it's getting cleaner and cleaner. And your water rates are gonna keep increasing. If the city council approves what is this pre-prescribed rate schedule, it's not exactly the same increase every year, and of course I can't predict what they'll approve, but approximately for 3 more years, and then it kind of levels out. But let me just, before I forget, we have saved, folks, this is amazing. We put no regulations on you. We did not say you are not allowed, we're gonna shut off your water. Actually, I think some cities north of us do that if you use too much. We just said, please, for the sake of the Great Salt Lake and the drought we're in, be conservative. And we are just about to cross the 3 billion gallons saved threshold for this year alone. And we saved 2.9 billion gallons last year. And here's the kicker. If you look at how much water we used in the year 2000 to how much we used last year, we are using 30% less water than we did in 2000. And you know what our population has done? It's the kind of growth that's happening here, the multifamily, and just frankly, newer building codes and more efficient fixtures and things, less lawns being created out there. We're growing our people, but we are not growing our water use, and I think that's an amazing thing. Go ahead, in the back.
So I was just gonna say, I participated in the iUtah project a few years ago, the multidisciplinary urban growth and water research project throughout the state. 2/3 of our water use in the state is outdoor. So we have to raise the rates because there is less water and we have to use less water. Do we have a municipal policy to subsidize or otherwise incentivize landscaping changes? Because it's, again, if we talk about impacts to neighbors and neighborhoods, we've got to raise those rates. That doesn't mean it won't be excruciatingly painful for some people to
Yes. Yes, so Nick is going to talk to you about the incentives for transforming your landscape. And you're right that 70 to 80% of all of the water in Utah goes to agriculture uses, outdoor uses. It's not exactly that for Salt Lake City because I think we only have like one farm left and it's the Crossy Ranch up there and it's not gonna be a farm for much longer. But one more thing, there's 3 tiers of, and you may see this on your water bill. Depending on how much you use, your water gets more expensive the more you use. So that's, in addition to the rate increases, a really permanent way to say it's a great incentive for you to conserve. Yes.
Actually, you wrote it down on a little sheet. I read that 6% of the total residential water, including our yards and gardens, is the water use in the state. It's only 6 to 8% at the most. So by not watering a park strip and ripping off the lawn, we're just not making hardly any difference. If anything, we're gonna let our established trees die, and we will live in a much hotter city, with much greater environmental consequences, and a decreased quality of life, and less beauty around us. I know xeriscaping is a great idea, but most people can't handle it, because they'll let it go to pot, and they won't water their trees, and they'll let the weeds take over. I don't think we should encourage that. I think if people are serious about saving water, they should stop eating as much meat as they do. Reduce their meat consumption drastically.
But most of the beef we eat here does not get raised using Utah water.
Well,
So
yeah.
that doesn't help the local water.
Well, we're a lot of alfalfa that gets sent to China.
So my point is, cutting back on beef consumption won't help the local water.
But we should probably
I think you should invite Laura Briefer, who's the Director of Public Utilities, to come do 45 minutes with you on water consumption. And to your 6% part, I hadn't heard that statistic, but for an entire state number, that's possible. But our water in this valley does potentially flow to the Great Salt Lake. And that's not true of the entire state. The entire state is not the watershed of the Great Salt Lake. And the Great Salt Lake is a really serious issue for us. So while a lot of the watershed flow into the Great Salt Lake is north of us from the Bear River area in particular, and there is a great deal of agricultural diversion up there, I want you to know that we are looking at every tool that we can wield, even ones we haven't before, that we can help stop diversions and put more water into the Great Salt Lake.
Do we sell the water to other?
We sell the water to Mill Creek and parts of Sandy, and they pay a little bit more for that diversion than we do.
Just a super quick comment on the water rates, because I sat on one of those committees. That was something we recommended, and it was good to see implemented with the tiered rates, but I will just say it's all relative, and it seems like 15% increase seems like a lot, but our rates are the lowest in the country in Utah, and it shows, and it's so much cheaper to buy 1,000 gallons of water than a gallon of gas. It's insane. Like, our rates are still incredibly low. So I think we have to take that. Yes, it can be a strain for low-income people, but everything is a strain for low-income people. And it's, in this country, rates are one signal that we have a shortage or we need to conserve. So I'll just make that point, having been
It's
on.
all relative.
Yeah.
Water is cheap in Utah compared to the rest of the country. When your rates go up, you say, oh, it's so expensive. Okay, but also I'll say our income is relative to the rest of the country as well, and housing costs and all of that. Shall I go through some of these? The first one I looked at was about the doubling of the residential population. How's the city addressing this need, and how can we better incentivize or require that of developers? The need. I'm not sure which need. Gwen, do you wanna?
The need for open space and green space, that was on
Yeah.
there.
Did you know the city set aside about $3.5 million about 5 or 6 years ago? We wanted to acquire land for another more central downtown park, and then, everybody thought the market growth would taper off after about 7-8 years. We're in year 14. We are starting to see some slow with inflation that's happening. We were never able to buy that park, and so we tried to figure out how do we incentivize green space development in construction that's happening downtown, while at the same time recognizing the housing crisis that we're in, which is Nix, Bailiwick, especially. How do we fit all the people who want to live here, but also really who are living here now and falling into housing crisis. And we were seeing numbers, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was, today we have about 52% of our residents are renters, and that's a growing number. Think about how that changes the character of our city, where just 20 years ago, we were a vast majority of homeowners. But we have been asking developers, how can you build in more green space, but at the same time, we want to make sure we maximize vertical development in the areas that can hold it, like in a downtown core. Ultimately, we're not seeing green space development, and I don't necessarily know that we want to have setbacks in our central business district, for example. And so that's where Reimagine Nature, I don't know if any of you participated in that, asked you as residents, what do you want to see at the parks you go to today that aren't there now? It analyzed what needs in the city exist where there aren't parks or trails access. So part of what the bond proposal is this response that we haven't been able to get from the natural market. It's not going to create the parks and open space. We do get impact fees. So with every front door that's created, we get a fee from the developer, and it's divided in about 4 ways. And one of those buckets of division is for new parks creation. So when we bought Allen Park in April of 2020, I was able to use a majority of, actually I'm not quite sure, public utilities brought up some money because of the creek that runs through, and about the balance of the rest of it was impact fees, because we can't take care of existing parks with impact fees, but we can create the new capacity. And the state of Utah is pretty strict about what fees you can put on developers and what restrictions you can put on development. So at this point, the bond is our answer to the residents of saying we want to be able to go outside more. Now you guys get to decide if you want to pay $5 a month potentially for that increased access. Traffic calming issues. Oh, this is a long one. I'm gonna have to take that one because it's a page of writing. Bonnie, it seems that speeding is totally acceptable, and can't quite, that it feels dangerous, plain dangerous for pedestrians. So the city council funded recently an increase in the traffic calming projects that are submitted mostly through community councils. Also through our transportation department, who are identifying ways that we can slow traffic down, like bulb outs at corners that create kind of natural pinch points for traffic coming through and make it uncomfortable to go quickly if you're driving a car.
Yeah, so pinch out bikes, so that's the danger.
I ride bikes, I agree with you, like pinch out bikes too, you gotta slow down on your bike.
That just pushes into
Bumps
traffic.
are one thing that have been installed. Beacon, the flash lighting is really expensive, but know that there's more money, thanks to our city council putting that money into a fund with the transportation for traffic calming. So if you have specific spots where you think that should be addressed, I think Esther's an expert at getting with the city to put together those kind of applications.
Are the blinking lights working?
The flashing lights? Yeah, yes and no.
Even though they're expensive.
I don't have any, I don't have stats for you, but I know our transportation folks do on the rate of pedestrian vehicle bad things versus, pre-installation versus post. And that would be, I can follow up with Esther and give you some info on that. I know the 21st South Hawk signal is something we've been tracking, but they're like $80,000.
Well, there's one right in front of the school here, and I'm curious if it works.
We can ask our principal too. Yes.
Related to that, I was going to say that the traffic calming, I think is a great idea for certain streets, but when you look at like 13th East, 5th, Sunnyside, those are basically raceways at times that late at night and even during the middle of the day. I mean, we were just out walking today, cars racing up 8th, and because they can, it's a wide boulevard, and they want to. And we don't see police out there anymore giving tickets. I mean, that's, I think, one of the issues.
They have been on Sunnyside.
Someone has.
They haven't been down on 8.
I did see them on 7th East. The motor squad was out on 7th East today.
Normally they
I know they can't be everywhere, but it does,
Well,
it seems to have gotten worse.
you know, the Chief Brown and the police will be the first to admit, I think, Marie, that the PD is reactionary, so they're listening to where the complaints are, they're following crime based on the crime stats that are happening also. They're actually doing more proactive policing than they have been able to do in years. But don't hesitate to call 799-3000, and that's the police non-emergency number, and you can request or report that you're seeing a lot more. And I know Detective is going to probably take that comment back to PD also.
So I do have my phone case
Speaking
laying.
will.
I will try to take a photo, but they're going too fast.
Don't get too close to that.
I mean, speeding is a design failure, so. it's
Speeding
really-
is a design failure.
So we need to work on
But
it.
these are also, the ones we're talking about are the major arterial roads, they are required to be able to carry all of that traffic that sustains this employment level here at the university and the hospital. So they can't all be first souths, and yet fit 10, 15, 20,000 trips in and out a day.
So we're talking about egregious speeders here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, Mayor, what we could do is we could type these up, send them to you.
Sure.
And request back.
Can I just take one more?
You can
How
do
much
all
time
you
do
want,
I
but you
Another
still
10
have,
minutes is done.
you
Oh,
still
good.
have like 12, 15 minutes. Up to you.
I want to talk about homelessness. This one is about homeless people coming in from other cities like Las Vegas. Cities putting people on buses, and what can be done to stop that. Nothing, unfortunately, nothing can really be done to stop that. Although we are not seeing the kind of delivery system of human beings that past administrations have had to face. And I really can't speak for all the past administrations, but there's a lot of institutional knowledge in City Hall of people who've been there for a very long time. And I think there's been practices in our own cities past of moving people out of the city as well. And there are good reasons at times for our organization to work with an individual who's unhoused and say, what kind of family do you have? What kind of network do you have? Where are they? Let's call them. It sounds like you could arrive there and that they would house you, or that you could come back or move in. They'll connect people with bus passes, and there's a lot of sense in that. But this wholesale, putting people on a bus to a place perhaps they haven't even selected and dropping them off, I don't see that happening according to our service providers in our city today. And yet, certainly there's a movement of people seasonally from some places to other places, and I've visited homeless resource centers in Seattle and Portland, Chicago, Las Vegas, and people at every one of those resource centers has said, we've got people from Salt Lake. Hey Joe, aren't you from Salt Lake? See, all your Salt Lake people are coming here, and it's a narrative, and there's absolutely a transient element to it. But if you ask our service providers, the vast majority of people who engage with the homeless services system are Utahns. Now, this is a reality that I am happy to talk about, but many cities are not wanting to talk about, which is the decisions made at city councils. And I'm talking about the 247 or however many cities and towns there are across the state of Utah today, who are making land use decisions in their communities that have wholly disallowed, in many cases, any affordable housing from ever being created. So talk about rezoning applications coming in and zoning not even allowing for affordability to be a component. This is real. And until just a few years ago, the state government just recently required that cities come up with an affordable housing plan. Now, it didn't require that they actually adopt that plan and implement the strategies therein, but it's recognizing that when you really don't allow for the creation of permanent supportive housing, deeply affordable housing, lives happen, things happen, divorces happen, accidents, injuries, addiction happens, mental health crises happen, behavioral health happens, and there's not enough resources, and housing can fall apart. And it happens in every community in this state. And where do people go? So Salt Lake City has, since the inception of Salt Lake City, been the place where people come, and we are still the epicenter of services. Over 70% of the homeless services in the county are in Salt Lake City. We are 17% of the population. It is not a city problem. These are human beings, and this is a statewide human crisis. And for the first time in decades, possibly longer, Tim can tell me when, the state is coming to the table, and the county and the city, and we're working together on a strategy. And you're seeing that in the city, in this last legislative session, finally getting mitigation funding. What is mitigation funding? Well, when the homeless resource centers were located in the family shelter in Midvale and the men's resource center in South Salt Lake, and we have two, as you know, when the road home closed. We have the women's resource center and the men's and women's coupled one. Midvale and South Salt Lake were guaranteed millions of dollars to pay for additional policing in the surrounding communities. That's mitigation dollars. And other cities who don't host anything pay into that account. Salt Lake City guaranteed $0. Zero. It's crap. It doesn't make any sense. It was politics. So I came in asking and talking and asking, and finally, the Salt Lake City finally has mitigation dollars, $2.7 million that we were just guaranteed in this last legislative session, and now we have the money coming in. And we don't have to go fight for it every year, knock on wood, because the reality is cities don't have services and don't have permanent supportive housing sufficient to deal with what's happening to their very own residents. And I've had mayors and council people across the state look me in the eye and say, if we have somebody who's experiencing homelessness in our city, we put them in the back of the cop car and take them to Salt Lake. Because that's where the services are. We cannot, no city can handle the state's housing and human crisis of homelessness. And finally, we're coming together. So the last, most recent big takeaway is the city bringing $6 million to the state's $27.5 million to bring more than 400 permanent supportive housing units online next year. And the majority of them will be open before the winter shelter closes in April. This is the biggest one-time step forward in permanent supportive housing we've ever done. And we've never done it in coordination and in strategy with the state. So I'll just let you know that this is the hardest issue that our city faces, and it has been, in my opinion, for a very long time, because few other entities want to take any responsibility for it. Most other cities are actually not only not helping to solve this issue, but are making land use decisions and legislative decisions that are perpetuating the problem. And we are finally making an arc of change in our relationship with the county, other cities in this county, as you saw Mill Creek step up to host a winter shelter this winter, and the state as well. So we're gonna keep at it. And there are, I could go on about some of the highest need and highest impact individuals who end up affecting a lot of quality of life issues. It's really a fairly small number of people. And the way that we're working with the justice system, the State Office of Homeless Services, DHHS, the jails, the courts, to try to come up with actual plans for these individuals, because it's a small number of people. These are human beings with individual needs that we can identify, and we can do better than taking them to jail or dropping them off at the ER. Yes, Jen, and then you tell me, I have 1 minute.
Quick question. I've talked to, we're actually helping a friend who's had a meth addiction for years. He was born in a very normal family, very loving family, and things went wrong. And it seems as though, from what he's telling me, and I'm not sure if that's the experience most of us have had here, that he was never told by the school system that why drugs are bad. He was only told that they were bad. I think if we want to prevent the problem of homelessness that we have now, especially in the future, we as a community, and that's not obviously not just for Salt Lake City, but as a state and a county, we have to address the drug usage by discouraging young people in a much more aggressive way that we're doing that with placards and billboards that show people on drugs and things that are very unpleasant to see, and really show or take them downtown and see what happens to people that have been ruined by the drug addiction.
Maybe you wanna run for school board? Just saying. This is not my wheelhouse at all. As a city, we can't touch the education. But I remember, this is your brain on drugs. You know what I'm talking about. Frying egg commercials, terrifying. I was Nancy Reagan era. Just say no, it worked on me. I've been scared ever since that egg was frying. But good point. We don't get to touch education, but I'll think about that one. David?
Yeah, we're actually going to have a little community summit, and we're going to talk about education, and we're also going to talk about housing. We wanted to discuss it outside like City Hall because we all have like really good ideas and like experience that should translate to politics, and it's really hard to squeeze in like these little meetings like this. So
you can come to the
would love to
group.
like invite both of you down and try and like bridge these ideas. So
Thanks for organizing. Thank you for having me tonight. I'll take all the questions that we didn't get through, and we'll try to email you some answers. And I really appreciate you giving me so much time with you tonight. My door's open. I actually had office hours for an hour before coming here, so you can reserve 10 minutes with the mayor. If you'd like to, we do this on a regular basis. If there's more you want to talk with me directly about, but my chief of staff is awesome. Rachel right here in the green shirt, she's very humble, so she's shaking her head no. But reach out to us, and if you want to volunteer, if you have ideas, if you want to share an article. We love it when the community gives us good ideas that you find other places. I've had people email me pictures of things places they've been in, something really neat, from pedestrian infrastructure to public art and other things. So know that we want to hear from you. We don't have the corner market on good ideas. You are out there living, exposing your brains to great things, and we want you to bring it back to us. I love working for you. So talk with me, let me know what you need, and we'll do whatever we can to serve you well. Thanks.
Now, Ava, there's also Big Ed's. When is that?
I'm sorry?
Isn't there also a come talk to me at Big Ed's?
Oh,
a liaison?
the office hours?
Yeah, when is that?
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry.
She'll find it. We're very appreciative of the time, and another one of my favorite departments. I really love Nick, and I just really appreciate that he is the planning director at Salt Lake City. And so I'm pleased to introduce him to talk about not only the affordable housing, and I think a lot of people don't quite understand what that might mean, but also anything else that he thinks would be helpful to us up here.
Thank you. So I get the open mic, I guess. But real quick, I wanted to touch on a couple of things that we are doing in the planning division. For those who don't know anything about us, we help the city plan future growth and respond to the impacts of that growth, mostly through land use. The city has other divisions, transportation, parks, that plan other parts of the city, but we really are focused on the land use component of that. And we have a number of things going on to deal with some of the growth. The one that maybe some of you have heard about is what we call our affordable housing incentives. So under state code, we can't do inclusionary zoning. Some of you have heard about what that is. And so we've been looking at ways to incentivize more affordable housing units. Those are at a certain affordability level in the city when we have new growth happen. And what that means is different things in different parts of the city. So in the downtown area where we have the tallest buildings, those developments, new developments there, when they have options on different public benefits to include when they're over a certain size. Some of those that will include affordable housing. It'll also include open space, so having publicly accessible but privately owned and maintained public spaces on their property. It could be mid-block walkways, breaking up our big block, so it's easier to get around, things like that. In some of our other areas, it may mean being able to build where you can only build a single family home now, being able to build maybe 4 townhomes or 4 units, provided 50% of those are affordable. Where we are right now is that we went to the Planning Commission earlier this year, probably the longest single public hearing we've ever had with the Planning Commission. I think it went almost 4 hours. We've had over 1,500 comments submitted about it. People who have concerns about what it means for them. And what we're doing now is taking each and every one of those comments, and we've categorized them into different themes to try to improve this proposal so that we can address those impacts and we can make it truly beneficial for future residents of this, current and future residents of the city. We hope to be able to go back to the Planning Commission in January. With that, there will be a time for people to review the updated draft and what's changed in that, so we can get some more comments. A couple other projects that we have going on related to some of the topics we've talked about. I wanted to touch on the water real quick, is that we are starting the process of updating our landscaping regulations. Our regulations are very, very complex in Salt Lake, more complex than probably most other cities. In fact, I'm willing to bet that most people don't know that there's landscape regulations over their property and what they can do and what they need to do. And so we're trying to find ways to encourage people to do the right thing for their own needs to conserve water, but also looking at this new development and how much water it's using, particularly outdoor water. If you go out to our industrial area in the city, you'll see their setbacks, that area between the street and usually their parking or their building is almost always sod. It's completely useless sod, right? And I wouldn't say completely useless, but it's mostly useless sod. And so we're looking at ways to change that so that we are using less water. And just as an example, so if we took the amount of water that Salt Lake City saved, we're 17% of the county. If the rest of the county saved that same amount of water, we'd be able to fill 24,000 of the outdoor pools at Steiner with that water. So it may not seem like on an individual basis we're making a dent, but when you look at that collectively, it is a huge amount of water. And so the other thing that we're doing with the landscaping proposal is that we're working with both the Central Utah Water Project and I can't remember the other group, but the groups that have the incentives for people to convert their landscaping to use less water, to make sure that all of the property owners in Salt Lake City qualify if they want to. So the Central Utah Water Project is changing how they do their incentives, and cities have to have a certified landscaping ordinance for their residents to be able to do that. That goes into effect in March, and so we're going to we're meeting with them on Monday to make sure. We think our current code does it, but we want to make sure that we're doing everything right so that we're not doing something inadvertently so people aren't eligible for those incentives. On the top 10 list, I wanted to talk a little bit about the safety of residential units and how the role the city plays in that, particularly existing ones. We know that throughout the history of Salt Lake City, we've had a ton of units that have been built in basements and add-ons in the back and everything else like that. We have a process in our city that allows those units that may have never have been built with valid permits to basically legalize themselves. One of the requirements is that they have to meet minimum life safety issues. So they have to have those smoke CO2 detectors. People have to be able to get in or get out in case of an emergency. And so those are the core requirements that we look at. Our civil enforcement division actually goes out and inspects apartments over a certain size. The state restricts what we can inspect in that regard. But they go out every 4 years. I think it's every 4 years right now. Obviously, as the number of apartment buildings is growing, that might shift a little bit. But they go out and they inspect to make sure all of those things are still working. Their smoke detectors, their CO2. The fire department does the same thing, and making sure that all the egress is still clear. Those emergency stairs are functioning, and everything else. And people haven't done things to make them more dangerous than they should be in case of a fire. So hopefully that covers some of that. The other thing I wanted to touch on a little bit, without going too much, we've talked a lot about the growth of the city, and I wanted to put some perspective on that for people. So if you look at the development trends in the city, probably the most telling is the building permit valuation. So every time someone submits a building permit, they have to put a value on that project. For new big construction, that value is based, it's already predetermined in the building code, how to calculate that. Since 2010, the permit valuations in Salt Lake City have increased 8-fold. We saw a 64% increase just from 2020 to 2021. So, while that may sound like 64%, what does that really mean? In 2020, the building permit valuation was $1.5 billion. In 2021, it was $2.5 billion. I don't know what it is yet this year, but we're pretty much on pace for at least equaling that. Our land use applications, these are things that many of you as a community council get presented to you that you weigh in on and things like that, the conditional use of the zoning changes. Those are, in 2021, we were 23% higher than our 12-year average. But here's the big thing, the things that have to go to the planning commission, those are the big projects, is up 40%. And to give you an idea of what that means in terms of housing, since that's the big thing, in 2021, we had our single largest year as a city ever in entitling a housing unit. What that means is it's been approved either by the planning commission, through our office, or through a building permit. So the planning commission alone, or the planning division, alone last year entitled 6,400 housing units. There's roughly 88,000 in the city as a total right now. 5,100 of those have been issued a building permit, so they're under construction at the moment. Since 2019, we've had 11,138 housing units that have been issued building permits. Some of those are now open, most of them are still under construction. And to put that in perspective, the largest decade of housing building we've ever seen in Salt Lake City was post-World War II, so about 1944 to 1954, we had 14,000 housing units built. So we are in, as you see and look around, an unprecedented period of growth in the city. We have started to see a little bit of a decline in building permits for a few months because of interest rates. But for some crazy odd reason, we have no idea why, September had more than double the average for building permits that Septembers in previous years have had. No clue why. So yeah, so that's kind of like just big picture types of things. I don't know if there's any specific questions for me or not, but maybe there are. Jen?
Mayor Mendenhall talked about how the other communities are not taking on their responsibility for affordable housing, and so how does Salt Lake City compare? It feels like sometimes Salt Lake is like this island trying to do all the zoning and all the housing, and the rest of the county is still like half-acre lots out to the southwest. How is this comparing to your colleagues when you compare notes with fellow planning directors on, like Mill Creek and some of the others are getting some of this, but relative to the other communities, is it really just the onslaught in Salt Lake City, or?
2/3 of all housing units being built in Salt Lake County are being built in Salt Lake City right now. And I think that speaks for itself. What we try to do is we try to be a model for other communities. We try to show that you can build new housing and it can fit in. And some of our projects do that much better than others, but That's one of our roles. And we also work very closely with the Utah League of Cities and Towns to shape state policy on that, because we know we can do everything right in Salt Lake City and still have the same impacts we're having, because if affordable units open up here, it's not just gonna be a current Salt Lake City resident that's gonna move into that. And so we know that our neighboring cities have to be along and be partners in that as well.
As a follow-up, is it still true that I guess office occupancy is down, but how does isn't 75% of the traffic to downtown was from out of Salt Lake prior to the pandemic? Is that still holding?
I don't know I don't know that.
Is that
we can see if our transportation division has some numbers on that. I'm not
just
sure.
because it seems like if we're mostly rentals and a lot of people are moving out to buy housing, then they're commuting into our jobs, but that's just putting pressure on all the things.
We are seeing somewhat of a flip with our downtown residents, where they're actually commuting out. More of them are commuting out of the city than they have before. A lot of those are commuting to the Silicon Slopes for work.
How much is a affordable housing unit? How much is a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom unit?
So the affordability level is determined by the area median income. And there's different levels. So the area median income is gonna be based off of the household size. For single, I think it's right around 50,000. For two, I think 60. Up to a family of four, I think it's 77 something, maybe 80,000, I can't remember. And so affordability is usually tiered, right? There's usually an 80% of that. So if you're a single person making $50,000, 80% is kind of the highest level of affordability. So whatever 80% of that is, I guess that's 40,000. But what we are trying to do is aim at the lowest things. The market is pretty much providing the 80%, but it's that lower things. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do with the affordable housing incentives, is get that target to that threshold to when you can use the incentives as low as possible for the incentives to still work. So what that means primarily with taxpayer dollars is that if somebody is investing in using those dollars, what these incentives do is that it either allows that AMI to go lower or to have more units at maybe 60% or 50% AMI in that building. So that's the primary goal.
Two questions. On the affordability, one question would be, I know that the city, basically the citizens of the city, are subsidizing these affordable housing in these new complexes that are being put in. So does that affordability, how long does that last in the building? Is it a lifetime of the building, or is it just like a 10-year process? And my second question is, the councilman today mentions about an SRO, and could you tell me the difference between an SRO and somebody that has a house that's renting 5 or 6 different bedrooms out of that? So what's the difference on those?
So first off, for the period of affordability is going to be dictated by the lending source. If it's federal dollars, it's going to be one thing. If it's state dollars, it's another. If it's city dollars, it's another. And I think that we put ours at 50 years, I think. I can't remember what most of ours are, but I think that's where it is. 30? 30, okay. Some of them are more, really depends on that lending source. Second, shared housing SRO type of development. Right now, a homeowner who is renting out 5 of their bedrooms is technically violating their code, right, the city code, because that's too many. Right, there's too many in the house. What the SRO / shared housing does is that it creates a model for those people who have the space and they're in a zoning district that allows it to start having maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms, share usually a kitchen. Most of the newer built SROs each unit will have its own private bathroom and then a shared kitchen with maybe 3 or 4 or 5 units. That's what our proposal does. It basically says no more than 2 bedrooms can share a bath, and I think it's no more than 5 or 6 bedrooms can share a kitchen. So the idea is that there's cost savings in the housing by not having every unit, even if it's a micro unit or a studio, have a full kitchen and a full bath, basically.
Who's capturing those cost savings?
Well, it's gonna be the developer, right? I mean, the harsh reality of cities, developers build cities. And the best thing that cities can do is try to figure out how that development can provide the best benefit to those people who want to live there. Yeah.
So I follow the ADU issue and the ADU ordinance with considerable interest and professional interest. And we struggled to get traction after that long, bitter political fight to pass that ordinance. The last year I checked, we had 35 permits issued in the year in the whole city. Are we gaining any traction? And sort of related to that, does the planning division have an understanding of theoretically how many properties in Salt Lake City that fall within that, within the zones permitted in the ordinance could actually accommodate one?
We do. There's 44,000 properties that can build an ADU. And we are in the process of updating the ADU regulations to remove some of the barriers. Now that we've had that for 4 years, we know what those zoning barriers are. And we also know, we're starting to know what the impacts are. And the impacts really are not much different than the single family home. So our proposal is to clean up some of those things that were barriers. But probably the most significant thing that we're doing is that we're actually allowing an ADU for any use in the city. We're one of the few places in the country that's proposing that. So if you have a business, you can convert the back half into a shop or into an apartment. A lot of times we'll have like multifamily mixed use is allowed, but not a single unit is allowed. So we're removing those barriers because we actually have heard from a lot of people who want to convert an unused space in commercial buildings to a residence so that they can live where they work.
This is proposed re-architecting in the vision that this city has to change that ordinance?
Yeah, it's gone through the planning commission. We're in the process of trying to get the final ordinance from our attorney's office, and then it'll be transmitted. Hopefully the city council takes it up in the spring.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have one last question about Harbor Bay and development on University Street and the current zone versus changing zone.
Let Marie go, and then I can answer that.
I'm being a NIMBY, but there are portions of the city that should be maintained, in my opinion, obviously.
Well, yeah, and where the site where Harbor Bay was proposing is a local historic district. And what that means for us is that that's, at least for that area, our priority is historic preservation. And so
why did they even think why did they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and pretend they could do 13 stories? 13.
I don't know. I can tell you.
So it wasn't there was
no. The very first time I sat in a meeting with them, I said that exact same thing to them. Like, the goal here, our focus is going to be on preserving this historic preservation.
Okay, perfect.
If you want to go try to change that, here's the process. But you're going to have to convince us that your project is so much more important than the goals of
I had a call
preservation.
last week where a developer said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of the historic district problem. We'll buy your house at a premium. I live on University Street."
And then tear it down.
I'm sure you forgot.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Nick.
I gave
very
him an
much.
answer.
I mean,
I've thought about it.
yeah.
A couple of things on that. One of the things that we want to work very hard with the university and with the city on is figuring out some of all of their needs. They have 3,000 students on the waiting list. They want to expand to 40,000 at the University of Utah with faculty and stuff too. And they would love to have it be an on or near campus experience, which puts bullseye on our area. And so how do we actually help them? We can't accommodate it all and still have our neighborhood. It'll be wiped out. So it's like, what can we do? You know, where can it go? What could we consider? So we just have to keep working on that. The other thing on the affordable housing is the worry, because the need is so high for the university, that any affordable housing or naturally occurring housing automatically gets gobbled up by students. And it doesn't actually go to the families or to the workers that need it. And so how to make that work somehow. I did want to say that the meeting tomorrow with Ava and the liaisons at Big Ed's is from 10 until 12. is tomorrow. And there's some other locations as well. I'm gonna put that on Facebook so that you have other locations that those can actually take place.
Is there a topic or anything? Or is
It's
it just
anything that people want to
Okay.
bring up and need to bring up so we can keep talking and having this great dialogue.
Do you want to go for a walk?
Also, I just really appreciate the city referring things and developers to us. The more we can work with people early on, we've been able to do things and say things in the community that sometimes are not legal for the city to say, but we can say things that, and help create other places and do a lot of mitigation. We've done a lot. There's been a lot of mitigation, and sometimes things still get built, but we have a lot of benefits on how it actually gets fit in without it impacting us in a negative way. So last but not least, Marie, thank you for being last. She won't always be last. Marie is new as our liaison lieutenant for, detective for our area. We're very excited to have her here. She comes with a great reputation. And so anyway, we look forward to working with her and having help in our area.
You can put it back here if you'd like.
I have awkward hands, so I don't know what to do with them, so I'm just gonna put this here and hide them. Alright, so first, thank you everyone for being here. This is the most well-attended community council meeting I have ever been to. So this is an amazing community here, and I see a lot of people who live here who are willing to step up and say, hey, I'm here, I'm present, I wanna hear what's going on, and let's talk about it, let's find some solutions. So thank you for just being here. Thank you for having me. I do what I'm told, I go when I'm told, that's what I do, and so last is just fine for me. And I'll try and make this short and sweet because I'm not very long-winded. But the mayor's team and the city staff that I work with, I will tell you, you will not find a more genuine team of people who have come together to try and solve problems, and maybe it's not a solution, but it's something that we can continually work on. So being in this job, I am new to this position, but I'm not new to law enforcement, and I'm not new to life. I started law enforcement later in life, so I was a regular person for a lot longer, and I went to the police academy when I was 34. So going there, I kind of felt like I had a different perspective, and I could have done anything, and I really wanted to help people. I actually do love trees also, mostly because I hate being hot. They give me shade and they keep me cool, and my favorite book growing up was The Giving Tree, and I actually have a tattoo of the Giving Tree. So that kind of goes on with what I love. I love the outdoors. I love bicycling and hiking, camping, and so forth. So to give you a broad perspective, first of all, and then we'll break it down to East Central community. In District 4 alone last month, in a 1-month period, there were 8,532 calls for service that came into either 801-799-3000, which is the non-emergency number, or 911. There are currently 52 officers who are assigned to Central City. So 52 officers handled those calls in a 1-month period. And on average, Salt Lake City receives approximately 300,000 calls for service for PD every year. That's about 170 to 190 patrol officers handling those calls. So in East Central City, you guys had 687 calls last month. A large majority of those calls were noise disturbance. So I definitely hear you on the noise problem. I just had a meeting with a community member. He's actually in District 3. He lives on the other side, right next to the university on Butler Avenue. Right over there, his name's Eric Swenson. He's fantastic. And he's lived there for a very long time. His parents lived there and died. And he's lived there his whole life. And one thing that he's found that works is exactly what Esther said. Going up as a community member, knocking on all the doors. Hey, what's your point of contact for this year in this house? I live in the community. Can I get your phone number? If you guys are having a party, will you tell the people around so that, we can have a point of contact and ask you to turn it down? Because I will tell you, these kids that are in college, a lot of them are trying to get into grad school, and the last thing they want is any kind of police call associated with their name. So they, as a general rule, are very receptive to, okay, yes, let's talk and let's try and keep this down, especially when it comes to DUI. So he has found, as from living here his whole life, that they are generally pretty perceptive. Now, the parties that get out of hand, those need to be addressed for sure. So working together as a community, I absolutely love that. Let's think outside the box. One of the most frustrating things being in a position where you are trying to help people is realizing that not everything has a solution, and like people experiencing homelessness. It is a very, very, very hard, complex problem that is a statewide issue. I fully agree with the mayor and the city staff. It is put upon Salt Lake City, but it's a very, very hard thing to combat, especially when you go and you say, hey, is today the day you'll accept resources? No, it's not. Okay, well, hey, is today the day you'll accept resources? Yes, it is. Okay, the resources I have are this. So let's think outside the box and let's try and work and let's do what we can. So every police officer in Salt Lake City right now, whether you're a detective or you're a patrol officer or whatever, is on mandatory overtime. So we're all working mandatory overtime shifts from now until the end of the year, and that's largely because we have so many officers who are injured, whether in line of duty or they have cancer or injuries or any other type of thing. They're on light duty, they're answering the phone calls though, they're still working. So all of us have stepped up when we said, okay, we'll work some extra to help out patrol because there are people, they're just suffering. You know, they come into a shift, and especially afternoon, you show up for a shift and you've got 60 calls waiting for you. And so it's a very hard thing to combat, but we are trying to do, different things like the mandatory overtime that, just to try and help it. So, and fortunately, police, we're here and we want to help. That's why we got into this job. And so we're all just stepping up and doing all we can to help. Of those 687 calls in East Central Community, 190 of the calls generated a police report. So that a large part of those police reports were traffic accidents in this area and vehicle burglaries. So my biggest advice is don't leave anything in your car. Drive safely. And if you're driving safely, watch out for the people who are not. Don't assume anyone is doing what they are supposed to do. Just watch what they actually are doing, and then, drive accordingly. And then, don't leave anything in your vehicle, even if it's a sweater, because some people might think, oh, they're hiding something under that sweater. So just do what you can. Lock your doors, do what you can for prevention. Always lock your doors, home, vehicle, everything. And if anyone has any questions, super happy to be here. Yes.
Random question. We have my neighbors across the street are probably one of those. We have a neighbor who has some sort of mental issue. I'm not sure what he's graduate.
Schizophrenic.
But he has a real aversion to noise.
Real or perceived?
Yes.
Noise.
And even when noise is not really happening, just somebody playing they are college age kids, but they're actually not. Surprisingly, they're not. But he has come into their house. He has threatened. He constantly does, not just to them, but to the girl to the north of him who goes across the street. And I know they've called and made complaints, but sometimes the police have come and I said, what is our best avenue?
Okay, so that is my bread and butter.
It's
so
a random, I want to be helpful.
For sure. Oh, definitely. Yeah, and Esther has my contact information, and I'm assuming. See, I have hands that are just everywhere. Send me the home address and
his
the
dad
person.
lives in California, and he bought the house for him here.
Yeah.
And that's great. but-
I'll forward that to our
Just the
social
noise canceling
workers.
earphones might be-
Yeah. So we have a team of social workers who work with our police officers, and they don't only respond to a call where you would make a call to patrol.
Yeah.
They follow up with people.
That's good.
They make that real connection. So that is exactly what I love to do, and what I love about this position too is it's more of a complex problem. It's not just reactionary. It's reactionary, but it's not getting the solution that we need. So please.
No, and that's perfect, because
send
I
me-
understand that we're obviously short-staffed, whatever, but we want to
Oh,
get it
yeah,
done the
fantastic.
right way.
So,
So this is probably a broader question for the police department generally and perhaps the city, but it seems to me like of those calls, an enormous number of them fall below what I would consider necessary to send a uniformed officer, and somebody with a lot lower level, I don't mean lower, but a different level of training, because I know how hard it is to get through post, would be appropriate. Is there any effort in the city to sort of deputize a whole other layer? I volunteer with animal rescue, and I work a lot with Salt Lake County Animal Services, animal services came out of policing, frankly, and a lot of animal control units are still under police departments. But it's like what Esther said, like I have so much better, sometimes a uniformed officer coming to the door with animal control in a truck is not the right answer, and we can solve a lot of problems, and we do a lot of work to help, and it's that level of access instead of a higher level that can actually be beneficial. So I'm just wondering how we can reduce the load, put the officers on the actual things that need a uniformed officer, and change this so we're not just like pushing everyone to overtime and killing our police officers with exhaustion. Is there what's going on that way?
We do have, and I don't know, has it started yet? We're
19 civilians.
right, yeah.
Who hires a sergeant, and the funding gets released in January.
So we have, and this is new, it'll be 19 civilians who will be answering police calls that come in for service, freeing up officers. Because right now we have officers answering calls, that can be handled by telephone. That will free up these officers to maybe take some more criminal calls and these 19 civilian, and so it's fantastic. But I will tell you, the most dangerous call I've ever been on in my career, it was actually in Layton City, was a noise disturbance. It was a guy, and he pulled a gun on me, and we had shot his brother, who was he had assaulted many people just before that. Anyway, he just saw me show up, and he just had his music a little too loud in the apartment complex. So I wouldn't ever recommend sending anyone to any call in the field without just proper training. So, because one thing you'll learn is there's the call that comes in, and then there's the call that it actually is, and it's not always the same. So yeah, but that program, and if you want to talk about it a little,
I just want to add a couple things, and you can read about this on the SLCPD website on the crime control plan. We have done a lot of things on different alternative responses is what we're calling it. And so the call diversion is one, the civilian team that we'll be building is another. But think about, you see the officers out here when the football game gets out. We've got patrol officers directing traffic who can't respond to calls. We don't need patrol officers directing traffic. So those are some of the kind of actions that the civilian team will do. But the mental health providers, the social workers who are with our police department, they are always co-responders, so they're always going out with an officer. Another way that we've diverted is the chat team, which is the community health access team, I think, for the fire department. 3 social workers with the fire department, because they also don't always need a full 4-person squad to go out. So a lot of different ways.
Great, thanks.
sorry, Maria. And the ones doing traffic are actually on overtime, but yeah. So, yeah.
This might be more for this group assembled than for you, because this has been called into the police department already, but in the past week, we've seen what looks like a squad of people driving around, trying to cut off catalytic converters. So park your car with your tailpipe towards your house and off the street if you can. Seems to be a thing happening in our region.
Yeah, we did have a huge uptick in that. I did notice over the summer for sure.
I just wanted to mention that our, getting our neighborhood watch program going could be real helpful.
Yeah.
For our community and take some of those,
Know your
less
neighbors,
important,
talk to
yeah.
your friends.
And that's what Neighborhood Watch is, right? It's neighbors coming together and saying, hey, I know you went over at that house and you do not live there. I mean, it's really just all the neighbors watching out for each other, coming together, knocking doors, getting to know you. You know, hey, I see your sidewalk isn't shoveled. Can I help, or is there a reason, or, you know, what have you, or your tree is dying, you know, can I come and water it for you? It's all of us coming together and.
Thank you for
and
not
just doing
arresting
that.
me.
Does anyone else have anything, any questions for
I
Mark?
have one quick question. How does campus police figure in with
Good question.
maintaining, I mean, university has very strict student behavior codes, and most of the issues are off campus with university students. University campus police are state police. Where are they?
Yes. Yes. So
You don't have to answer.
they have boundaries, so if a house that is occupied by students attending the university is within the Salt Lake City boundary, it falls on our responsibility for the Salt Lake City Police Department. And if it's property of the university itself, then they are required to have the jurisdiction over that, so.
Is that
Can
where,
that jurisdiction be changed? Extended into the surrounding neighborhoods?
Yes.
And they can also-
That's much higher than me.
They can also control traffic after a university football game. Just my thought.
Too obvious.
Anyone else have any questions? Yes.
Would it be good if you wanted a social, or you thought the social worker should be involved in a call to request it when you call non-emergency, say, I think a social worker should come?
You can, you can always request it, and if they aren't busy, there aren't very many of them, we're really trying to hire social workers, but, if someone is available, they can dispatch, will air it all over every station, and if one's available, they'll respond. But you can request that, for sure.
I've done it before, so I'm just wondering if it's okay to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, our city people, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, all of you, for staying and for being so attentive. We've been a very calm audience today. This is a little unusual, so we didn't even need any little flyers. We could have just raised our hands. So thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you all soon.